All right. Hello, everybody. Let's go. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show where we look back at last night's slate. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Had to have that link there. But yeah, all good. So yeah, we'll look at last night's slate, then we'll look at today's slate. If you're interested in checking out the pre-lock show, click the link in the description and you can join us at 5:30 because that's what we'll be doing then, using the DS and which is our optimizer here at DFS Army, and making sure that we're good to go. But let's start off looking at last night's slate. I feel like I've been in this like habitual or like twilight zone of good night, okay, profitable night, bad night, okay night, good night. And it just keeps going in that same rotation. Last night was a bad night. That was a long way of me saying that. I think Marcus Smart was a core play. This was the nuts lineup for last night, by the way. Jaylen Brown, I had exposure to, but not enough. Um, Brandon Ingram was I forced exposure to him, but I think I ended up still being under the field. Jeff Green wasn't on my radar. Didn't have a lot of Robert Williams. Had a lot of Jamal Murray. Had a lot of Bruce Brown. Giannis Valanciunas was a leverage play, so that panned out. But it was just one of those slates where everything had to be perfect, and it wasn't perfect for me. It happens. I wish I had more Robert Williams and Jaylen Brown. That was probably the two biggest guys I needed more of. But yeah, all in all, okay time. Donnie said, "Good morning. Let's get this." Agreed, man. Agreed. This is a gigantic slate. We have a lot of games on deck, and I'm only 20 maxing tonight. So we'll see how it goes. Um, I think DraftKings was really tired of everyone playing the Hornets, and so they priced everyone up. The Bulls are in the usual bull spot. You guys know I feel like I play Vucevic all the time as a leverage play, and more often than not, I feel like it works out. And today he has a fantastic matchup against the Hornets, who we've been playing bigs against all year. And so I'm probably just going to play Vucevic here as a leverage play. And I don't really I think you can beat the Hornets in a lot of ways, but I'm not really super excited about playing Levine and DeRozan and crew here. So for me, it's probably going to be Vucevic and moving on. Like I said, for the Hornets, though, everyone's priced up a good bit here. The Hornets have a lot of guys who will probably be out tonight. Terry Rozier out already. Kelly Oubre is questionable. Gordon Hayward is doubtful. Dennis Smith Jr. is questionable. So quite a few big names here. I think we're expecting guys like Theo Maledon to continue to see more run. We're probably going to see guys like Svi continue to see more run, but they're not extreme values. Like they're priced, they're a little overpriced, to be honest. Like I can't even say they're priced appropriately. But I do think they're all in viable spots, but you're really going to need them to be extremely efficient tonight. And the matchup against the Bulls is just tough. Glad I'm not crazy, Terrence. Appreciate you, man. Keegan, Dante for his points. Okay, I hear you. Uh, you're thinking about DiVincenzo for the Warriors. I think that's probably who you're talking about. The Warriors are interesting tonight. We'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, I mean, I out of instinct, I know the Hornets are in a more beneficial spot tonight, but they're just a little bit too expensive for me to feel strongly about it. PJ Washington was a leverage play last time around. I still think he's a viable play because he's so involved in everything that they're doing now. Really, the only original starter at this point. Kenny G's mentioning Mark Williams. He is the only one who I would say is priced appropriately for the role he's playing. The only thing I don't love about Mark Williams is that they're splitting minutes. And they're splitting his minutes with like the other bigs here, but he's priced appropriately. I think he's a solid play. I don't think he's bad at all. So I'm planning on. I'm comfortable having some exposure to him, but I doubt I'm going to force it. So hopefully he's like roughly like 10, 15% of my lines, and I don't have to do anything crazy to get that. But there's a lot of games. A lot of games. For the Magic, to be honest, no one really stands out for me too much here. Kevin Harris is out. We know the guards have upside. We've been able to play bigs against this Wizards team before in the past because they're not great rebounders, but these guys aren't really standing out for me too much. But like I said, you can make a case for Wendell Carter Jr. here, Paolo, Fultz, Cole Anthony, but I don't really plan on having too much exposure to this team tonight. Keegan. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, Keegan, I'm sorry, man. I'm not a prize picks guy. We do have a lot of great prize picks coaches here who do videos on our channel, so definitely do check them out. But unfortunately, not my thing. For the Wizards, we have Bradley Beal out. Kyle Kuzma's been out. Both of those guys have been out for a while, so everyone's priced pretty appropriately here. We have seen my guy Denny Avdija crush lately. He's priced more appropriately at 7,100 now. Not the extreme value he has been over the last few slates, but still a viable play. Not a guy I plan on forcing exposure to once again because I like a lot of other plays and other games. But if he shows up in my lines tonight when I start running the DS, I'm not going to take him out or anything like that. Kristaps Porzingis, I'm interested in seeing what his ownership comes in at. If he's a little bit low owned, he's on my radar as a leverage play. And with the slate being so wide, it wouldn't surprise me if people do forget about him a little bit. Porzingis and Avdija are obviously better plays if Daniel Gafford ends up getting ruled out. He's currently questionable. They have an increase in rebound percentages when Gafford's out. Gafford is looking like a decent value option. To be honest, I'm okay with it, but I hope we get better value options available later on the slate. All right, guys, for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's see, what are we working with here? SGA is out, and Lindy Waters is still out. Waiters is still out. So, I mean, we pretty much know what happens here. Isaiah Joe has been in fantastic form when this exact situation has been happening. Not a tough matchup for him, so totally comfortable having exposure to Isaiah Joe. He's someone that I want to show up in my lines tonight, so I am prioritizing him a good bit. And then Jalen Williams, if I'm 115, he's another guy I want to make sure shows up. But since I'm not 115 tonight, he's someone that I'm just comfortable having exposure to. Outside of that, you can take your shots on your low-owned Giddey. Still a soft matchup against the Pacers. Josh Giddey, I think, is in a decent spot, but he's pretty expensive, and so that's why he's not a lock and load kind of play. He also is just very streaky shooter. So yeah, Isaiah Joe is my main guy for the Thunder tonight. The Pacers are kind of just like the Hornets. Tyrese Halliburton's out, but everyone else is kind of priced up a little bit. Miles Turner is listed as questionable. Miles Turner is really the guy that I care the most about here. When Turner's out, we've seen Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith have better performances. Nimbard and Mathurin are already solid because Tyrese Halliburton's out. They have an increase in usage when Miles Turner is out, and so this team is just very viable. Nora and Hield, I'm interested in seeing who starts here. We've seen Nora see more run lately, so that continues to keep him viable. But again, everyone's priced pretty appropriately here, so I really just want to wait and see what happens with Miles Turner to see if I should try and force some exposure to that situation. All right. For the Raptors, we have a little bit more questionable tags here. Surprise, surprise. Gary Trent Jr. is questionable. Will Barton's questionable. Delano Banton's questionable. Joe Wieskamp is questionable. This is a pretty big game. This Raptors against 76ers game, I think it's going to be pretty intense and defensive. So typically not the game I love to force exposure to. I feel like we've been playing a lot of Siakam and Fred VanVleet and Jakob Poeltl and even Boucher in some situations. For me, I'm not planning on forcing exposure to the Raptors tonight. The sim model's not updated yet, so that could change my mind if I can find some reasons to play them. But as of right now, they're not really on my radar unless Gary Trent Jr. ends up being out, and then all of the starters are much more viable, in my opinion. The Sixers are another interesting team too. You would think that like towards the end of the season they would start playing less minutes, but their coach said that he wants them to keep playing heavy minutes, Embiid and Harden, trying to get them into shape to start playing like the 38 to 40 minutes for the playoffs, which I mean I think kind of makes sense as long as they don't get hurt. And so that just kind of automatically makes me a little bit more interested in plays like Joel Embiid and James Harden being in a game that should stay close, knowing their coach wants to increase their minutes here. If they're going to be low owned, they're just kind of automatically more interesting to me. If they're relatively popular on this slate, out of pure habit, I'm just going to be less interested in them, just because it is a tough matchup and it is a pretty low total game. I don't like playing chalky guys in that kind of game environment. But again, if they're low owned, very interesting. All right. Next up, we have the Utah Jazz, a team that we've been battling with for the last few weeks here. We already have the news that Lauri Markkanen is going to be out. Kelly Olynyk is questionable. That news will matter a lot. We saw THT go off in the last game here. I remember Chris Dunn had a pretty decent game as well. This is another team that I don't plan on having a ton of exposure to due to a tough matchup against the Celtics, unless Kelly Olynyk is out. If Kelly O is out, I'm willing to go back to Kessler. I know he hurt everyone's feelings last time out. Willing to play Dunn, willing to play Abaji, willing to play THT if Kelly O is out. There's quite a few of those situations on this slate where there's one guy who's questionable. If he ends up playing, not interested. If he ends up not playing, much more interested in that team. Just have to keep an eye out on it, because these things do have dramatic impacts. Is there anyone else? I don't think so. Safe to move on. A lot of games. The Celtics, back-to-back for them. Jaylen Brown had a solid game, but they didn't play much of the fourth, so I'm not expecting them to be tired or anything like that. Robert Williams is listed as TBD. Al Horford's listed as TBD. Two really impactful plays tonight. If they're both out, Robert or Blake Griffin becomes probably one of the best value options on the slate. We've seen Blake Griffin see enough run in these spots where he is viable at this point. If they play, though, I don't have much interest. It does look like Tatum and Brown and White and Smart are also projected pretty well because the matchup's pretty soft, but I don't plan on forcing exposure to it, especially a pretty wide spread, unless they're extremely low owned. But not a situation I'm super excited about as of right now. Next up, we have the Knicks. For the Knicks, let's see. We have Derrick Rose listed as questionable. Dwayne Washington Jr. listed as out. A few gross names on this team these days, like Obi Toppin starting, is wild in my mind. He's a pretty low usage guy, so you never should feel great about having Obi Toppin in your lines. But he's a viable value play on this slate, since at least as of right now, we don't have a ton of value. He will not be a core play for me in a tough matchup against Cleveland, but I'm comfortable with him in my lines because of how cheap he is. Mitchell Robinson, I do prefer because he does, he has a higher usage rate, more impactful, things of that sort. But Obi Toppin plays more minutes, so I'm okay with both. I won't have a ton of either. And by a ton, I won't have 50% or more in these lines. Dave, you're good, man. I just appreciate you guys showing up. I know the end of the NBA season is when everyone starts to fall off because of frustration. It happens with every sport. So it's all good. I wasn't talking about you in particular, Dave, but just good to see you, man. Appreciate you sticking around with me. So yeah, outside of that, Julius Randle is out. It seems like he'll be out for a little bit of time now. So that definitely does make them more interesting, like Brunson, RJ Barrett more interesting, but I think there's still better plays on the slate because this is a pretty tough matchup against Cleveland. If Brunson is extremely low owned, I'll take my shot on him, but it's really going to come down to ownership because I don't love the matchup. Dave, you're right. Yeah, if you guys could hit the like button, share, and subscribe, I would appreciate it. But I always appreciate the support for you guys just sticking around. So no worries, no pressure. Cleveland, can't forget about them. The Cleveland team, they've been playing a lot of their starters a lot here lately too, especially with Jared Allen listed as doubtful and Isaac Okoro listed as out. We've seen just all of their starters see a bit more run, and that makes guys like Karis LeVert more viable on slates like this. And so I plan on having plenty of exposure to the plays like Karis LeVert, Darius Garland. We'll see where everything falls. When we get to the pre-lock show, it's hard to commit to these guys with so many questionable tags on this slate. But all things being even, as of right now, I'll probably be over the field on Karis LeVert and Darius Garland. Ricky Rubio and C. Osman did see an increase in minutes last time around. Again, that same kind of performance will need to be balanced out by, for sure, Jared Allen not playing. That's really the only way I feel comfortable having some exposure to them. And even with that being said, I don't plan on having a ton. Whew, all right. Halfway through. I think we're like roughly halfway through. So okay, we're doing all right on time. For the Atlanta Hawks. Let's see. Who do they have? I feel like the Hawks are always healthy, but I hope they're not tonight. Let's see. DeAndre Hunter is listed as questionable. So that's important for guys like Bogdanovich, who could potentially start for him. Sadiq Bey could see a little bit more run as well. Definitely a spot I want to look a little bit closer at, just because they do tend to have a pretty tight rotation, and because they split minutes with guys like Bogdanovich and Sadiq Bey and John Collins. DeAndre Hunter not being around potentially could make me want to take some more shots on those kind of guys like Collins, Bogdanovich, Bey, really whoever starts there. If I had to guess, it would be Bogdanovich would be the guy that sees the biggest boost, but we'll have to look a little bit closer at that before the pre-lock show. Grayson, what's up, man? Good to see you. Appreciate you for joining. And then DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, they're both projecting pretty well. Both have upside and ceiling. The matchup against the Nets isn't my favorite, to be honest. Per usual, when it comes to the Hawks, I'm going to let the domination station just kind of do its thing with them. I'm not going to force exposure to them when they're both healthy. This is the highest total. Nope. Second highest total game on the slate. But in my mind, it's the highest total game on the slate because the actual highest total game has a massive spread. So this is really the only realistic spread that I'm looking at with a really high total. So that's why I'm comfortable having exposure to the Hawks. But I like them. More than likely, probably going to have to force a little bit of Trae and Murray in there just to kind of get exposure to the high total game. But we talked about it already. Sabonis triple dub night. Oh, Grayson. The matchup against Portland's really good, but that's another massive spread. And so, kind of worried about the triple double aspect if he doesn't play the whole game. But it's likely, like, he'll have every opportunity to. Thomas, what's up, man? Good to see you. All right. Nets. Daron Sharp is probable. Ben Simmons is done. The usual guys here. We like this game. I like Spencer Dinwiddie. I like Mikal Bridges. I like Claxton. Cam Johnson, that leverage play saved my butt on Tuesday or Wednesday. Am I willing to go back if he's low owned? I'm willing to, but I doubt he will be low owned in this spot. But I like the Nets tonight. I don't really like their role players pretty much ever, but if some of them show up at less than 20% ownership, I'm okay with it. I'm not going to take them out. Probably favorite game on the slate, just from like a total standpoint. So I'm just going to force exposure to it. Similar story for the Hawks, but still prefer like Bogdanovich over the other guys, assuming DeAndre Hunter ends up not playing. For the Clippers, we do have Kawhi Leonard listed as questionable, but he was at shoot around this morning, so it seems like he's probably going to play tonight, which means they're a boring team. It was fun when Kawhi was out to load up on all these guys. Russell Westbrook crushed. Quite a few guys did pretty well, but with Kawhi Leonard playing, this game becomes much, much, much more boring for them. Everyone's priced pretty appropriately. Norman Powell is projecting pretty well. I'll have to just kind of see where he measures out with some of the other value we get once we get more injury news coming in. But with Kawhi playing more than likely, I don't really love the spot for Powell, but I need to dig into it before I make a strong judgment. But yeah, don't love the Clippers tonight. I'll play Kawhi if he's low owned, but that's about it. John Morant. John Morant's not 8K anymore. That was fun for that day. But outside of that, this team's pretty healthy. No one was really on the injury report. So now that they're healthy again in a decent matchup, everyone's priced appropriately again. I I'm open to taking shots on Jaren Jackson Jr. if he's low owned. He's just been in really good form with Ja and without. We'll have to look at the sim model when that updates, but for the most part, not super excited about these guys tonight, unfortunately. A game I do like a good bit is this Lakers game, and it's mostly because LeBron James is questionable. And I think LeBron James is going to play, to be honest with you guys. I do. But would love it if he ended up being out, and it would be a fantastic spot for Anthony Davis. So something I'm keeping an eye out for, just hoping LeBron James is out, but more likely than not, he'll probably play. And so then I won't have as much Anthony Davis, which is sad, but true. Another team that's really interesting now are the Timberwolves against a not so great Lakers team. The Timberwolves are looking pretty healthy, but they do have some important questionable tags. Torrin Prince is questionable, Austin Rivers is questionable, Jalen Noel's questionable, and Matt Ryan's questionable. If Torrin Prince and Jalen Noel are both out, I'm much more interested in Anthony Edwards, just because I think it solidifies his minutes floor. And I mean, it impacts usage a little bit, but not too much for me. Kyle Anderson becomes a bit more viable as well in that spot to solidify his minutes floor. And the matchup against the Lakers is great. I mean, both Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert are both projecting well tonight. I do like this spot for both of them, and so they'll both be in my lines tonight. I can pretty much say that for sure. If one of them are a little under-owned, I'm willing to make one of them a leverage play. I don't have a strong lean one way or the other yet. Anthony Edwards, like I said, is also on my radar. I think he will be pretty low owned, and so he's leaning towards leverage play for me tonight as well. And I like Anderson too, but he'll probably end up falling off once we get more value on this slate. So yeah, interesting team. I like this game. I like it a lot. Even better if LeBron James is out. For the Pistons, Ivy's been so good lately. Like Jaden Ivey's just been really good. And so it automatically makes me want to think like, oh, soft matchup against the Rockets. He should perform well here again. At 7,100, he projects decently well. I do think, let's see, do we have any injury news for these guys? Pistons. Yeah, the same guys who have been out for a while are still out, like Burks, Magruder, Stewart, Bogdanovich, Diallo, Cunningham, all that good stuff. But no one's really moving the needle for me too much. I'm open to having exposure to this team because of the soft matchup. Game total's fine. Spread's decent at 6.5. But overall, this is a domination station control situation. I'm not going to force it and or try to limit it too much unless like it's Killian Hayes popping or really just Killian Hayes. Or Doran. I'm fine with Wiseman and Bagley if they show up. Jaden Ivey, I would like for him to show up, but I don't love forcing exposure to those guys. They're pretty volatile. For the Rockets, KJ Martin's questionable. Tate's out. A lot of guys who've been out for a while for this team. So nothing that really moves things too much for me. If Martin ends up being ruled out, KJ Martin again, then we're expecting Easton to start. And pretty much every time Easton starts, I play him because he's a pretty good points per minute guy, and 5,100 is a little bit too cheap for him. But again, like some of the other guys on this slate, that's primarily only if Martin ends up being out. I don't love Easton if Martin's playing. I think Easton's a viable play. I wouldn't take him on my player pool or anything like that, but not someone I'm excited about unless KJ Martin ends up being ruled out. Jalen Green's projecting pretty well. Decent matchup against the Pistons. 6,900 is pretty cheap for him. So I'm comfortable with it. I had to say it and then listen to it and make sure I believed it. Like that was what that confirmation was. But yeah, I like Jalen tonight. He's fine. Next up, we have the Spurs. For the Spurs, they're relatively healthy. So we have Keldon Johnson, who was not on the injury report. Zach Collins, their starting center, was out, so that's pretty important. Devin Vassell is questionable, so another pretty big piece of news there. High usage guy. Jeremy Sachan out, pretty impactful. Doug McDermott, probable. Romeo Langford's questionable, which kind of matters, but not really. I think the big thing is here that we're expecting Sandro to start here. Sandro's been kind of hit or miss in these spots, but we can play bigs against this Warriors team, so I feel pretty comfortable with him. If I had to guess, if we don't get any more news, he'll be close to a core play for me tonight, even with the spread being so wide. These Spurs players should still see decent run, in my opinion, but there's still some risk involved there. Keldon Johnson, I'm open to playing when Zach Collins is out. That's a good amount of usage that moves his way, and it's a soft matchup against the Lakers. So I'm hoping these Spurs are pretty unpopular tonight, but I doubt it, especially if Devin Vassell ends up getting ruled out. That really moves the needle where a lot of these Spurs guys are going to project well, especially whoever ends up starting for him. If it's like Keita Bates-Diop, if Romeo Langford's out, then even like KBD would be more viable for me on this slate too. So I like the Spurs. I'm hoping a lot of people don't like them. I think the spread is pretty scary. And there's a lot of things to be concerned about. I know the Warriors destroyed them without Curry last time out. So with him should be even better. But I'm fine with the Spurs. The Warriors are much, much more scary to play, in my opinion. Super soft matchup against the Spurs. We've seen teams have really good games against the Spurs throughout this season. I am really just interested in ownership. If Curry or Thompson or Poole or Green or low owned, then I'm going to make sure I force exposure to them and then over the field. If they're pretty chalky, then I'm comfortable being underweight on them. Like I said, it's a fantastic spot, but there's plenty of reasons to fade. And if they're popular, then I'll fade. Looney and Kuminga are in really good spots here. I personally am not great at getting them right. So I'll let the domination station do its thing there. Hopefully I have a little bit of exposure to both, but not a strong lean. And then DiVincenzo is a fine play. I think hopefully, ideally, we'll have better value. But he should see some blowout run too. So that does make him a little bit more viable on this slate. And then again, if you're trying to play the blowout narrative, you can take shots on guys like Moody, who will see plenty of run in that spot. Anthony Lamb should see decent run there too. Don't love playing the blowout narrative though, but I know some people who have done it with some success, so still good to mention it. For the Kings tonight, unfortunately, they're pretty healthy. Not super excited about them. The spread's pretty wide. They're facing a no-name Portland team. You're going to need them to be extremely efficient in the small amount of time they play tonight. I think the easiest case is made for Fox because he's a little bit cheaper. He has to do a little bit less to reach value. But I'm just not super impressed by them. Fine having some exposure, but not a team I like to play a lot of when they're healthy. Portland, we don't know who's going to play. I saw they signed a guy on a contract last night, Shaq Harrison. They're bringing guys in because they're sitting everybody. I'm not going to read off their injury report list because it's honestly just too long. But all of their starters besides like Matisse Thybulle are gone. We're not playing tonight. I think we're expecting Shaedon Sharpe, Matisse Thybulle, Nasir Little, Trendon Watford, who's questionable to start, alongside Drew Eubanks. So these 5 guys right here, and then whoever else kind of fits in and decides to play tonight will become more viable. So I'm interested in seeing their starting lineup. I think if Watford ends up being out, things could get very weird and we could have some really nice value options. Unfortunately, we probably won't get that news by lock. So we'll probably have to late swap a little bit if you're up to it. But I think we could get some really good value from this game. Shaedon Sharpe is expensive here, but they've been giving him all the minutes in the world over the last few games. As a rookie, it makes sense for them to just kind of see what they have while they can. The Kings can't stop anyone. I think he could have some sneaky upside here. So I do still think Shaedon Sharpe is viable at 7,900. It sounds weird, but kind of makes sense to me. Interested in seeing where his ownership is. Hoping it's really, really low, but doubting it's going to be as low as I want it to be. Watford, if he plays, extremely viable on this slate. Hoping he doesn't, though. Nasir Little, he's priced appropriately. I'm open to having some exposure to him just because of the game environment. Drew Eubanks has been a solid center play for a while now. And then Matisse Thybulle is probably not like my favorite play, but probably one of my favorite sneaky plays on the slate. He's a low usage guy who will probably still see run in blowout time, which would probably be frustrating if I was him, but it's kind of funny. For the Nuggets, Jokic is listed as TBD. Jamal Murray is listed as unlikely to play. It's very possible tonight we have a Nuggets team without Jokic and without Jamal Murray. When that happens, Aaron Gordon leads this team in usage. Would love him tonight. Matchup against the Suns is tough, but they will need him tonight. Michael Porter Jr. is second at 5,900. Would lead the team in the usage. Would love him tonight. Reggie Jackson is third in usage, and then Bruce Brown is fourth. My priority would be Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Bruce Brown, and KCP. Those are the guys I know I want exposure to. Outside of that, I'm comfortable forcing a little bit of Reggie Jackson in there. And I think Christian Braun's probably getting a little bit too cute, but I don't think it's an awful play. But primarily, I prefer Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Bruce Brown, and KCP here. Those are guys I feel pretty safe about if Jokic misses. When it comes to their guards, I'm going to prioritize. I'm going to make sure I have a little bit of exposure to Reggie Jackson. But if we get that news too late, it's probably going to be hard for me to have a ton. And we saw Jeff Green do all right last night. I'll need to look a little bit closer at the stats to see if I think he's a viable play at 3,500, but he's not projecting very well right now, so I doubt it. But we also have Jokic in still, so that's probably part of it. For the Suns, they're healthy. They do have a soft matchup against the Nuggets, but this is a team that's really trying to develop. Kevin Durant's still on a minutes restriction of sorts, so doesn't feel like the best 9K play, in my opinion. Chris Paul at 7,200 is viable, but not my favorite guard. DeAndre Ayton is interesting, especially if Jokic ends up missing this game. He is on my radar as a potential leverage play, per usual. So, viable. Devin Booker, I have some interest in if he's extremely low owned, but kind of going back and forth on it, to be honest. So, like I said at the start of the show, guys, big slate. But there's a few games that do stand out a little bit more than some of the others just because of some of the news that we have. But with all the questionable tags we have in the earlier games, it could really switch things up. So definitely, per usual, keep an eye on the news and make sure that you're ready to pivot when we need to. For those of you checking out the pre-lock show, that will be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. That's only for VIP members. And so we'll make sure we're ready to go for that. So have a good one, guys. I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good day. Peace out.